our goal for this was to get meaningful content, accessible content, and resources to people that otherwise don't have access to it, or that struggle to find it, or that are worried about whether they're getting misinformation or where their content's coming from, and to also uplift voices in our community that are otherwise not really getting the visibility and exposure that they deserve. I think as coaches, we've talked with so many other coaches and creators and researchers that have amazing things to say and can give so much help to the community, but they don't have the platform, or they don't have the ability to take that information and give it to others. And even if there's someone who gets to present something at, say, the ADHD conference, that conference itself isn't super accessible to our community as a whole because of cost, and you have to, go to the location for it. And even the virtual conference itself that they host is pretty expensive. So we want to get free and accessible resources out there to the public. And this is why we created this.
On top of it, there have been a lot of virtual conferences, and it never really made sense to us because they're requiring us to have the content done before the virtual conference, or they're just riffing live. And both of those are strange, that they're taking a talk submission and grading someone on a proposal and not their final content, if the final content has to be done before the event anyway. Well, first, with the talk submissions, it becomes kind of an unfair system because it requires someone to be good at writing talk submissions and not just good at making content. And so we wanted to make that process a lot easier for people to break into. As long as you can make good content, we don't really care what kind of a essay writer you are. And also, because it is for people with ADHD, having pre-developed content instead of live talks makes it so that the content can be a lot tighter, and it can be a lot easier for us to pay attention to the whole message instead of potentially zoning out in the middle. This is from Christina. Is our content allowed to be self-promotional in part, and does our content have to have our face in it? I know not everyone is comfortable with their face being a public-facing thing, and I was definitely one of them when I started, which is why I had a podcast to start. So I really resonate with this whole, I'm really uncomfortable showing my face. And the answer to that is no, it's not required. Like if you want to use a different medium, like a lyrical video or animation or something else.
Perhaps some like B-roll with like your voice on that. Like that's
Yeah. That's fine. If you want to display something on video other than your face. I mean, if it is just audio, that is not the most compelling. So I would say put some sort of visual included with it. It doesn't have to be your face. But also, we as humans really like seeing faces, and it really humanizes them. So I want to encourage that. But if you're not comfortable with it, you don't have to. And as far as the self-promotion, we don't want the whole content to be self-promotional, but we do want you to be here and have it benefit you. So if you want to include like the kind of stuff you do very quickly at the end, how they can find you, all your social media handles and your website, that is totally okay. But if the content itself is like, look how great I am as a coach, we're probably going to stay away from those types of things. But definitely feel free to tell everyone what you're doing. We want this to be beneficial for everyone involved.
I mean, we're going to be looking at these submissions and take that into account. And I think I'm going to really echo what you said there. Part of the reason we're doing this is we know so many great coaches and creators that have amazing programs. We are, entrepreneurs ourselves. Like we have to try to market what we have, and we want to uplift other people. And so that's totally allowed. But again, if it comes off as just like a selly talk, we'll probably not accept it. We're also going to be like, when people submit stuff, if your content gets accepted, we want to promote you as well. So when we post any clips of your content after the conference, we're going to be tagging you in it. Like the goal here is that if you get to be a part of what we're doing, that we can uplift each other. Like, we want you to benefit from this. We don't own all the rights to your content.
We actually don't own
After,
any of the rights to your content.
no, yeah.
Own it. You're giving us permission to showcase.
Yeah. After the conference, we want you to share this stuff. Like, the purpose of us doing this, like I said, is to, make it easier for people like ourselves that maybe don't have an in with some of the like higher ups in some parts of our community, to be able to get exposure, to have a place at the table where they can use their voice and talk about things. And we want to make sure that you're benefiting from this too. This isn't just us being like, we want to take your content and it's just going to benefit what we do.
Yeah, it's
But,
basically how we wish other conferences would treat us as speakers. That's what we for this community, which kind of goes into another question that someone had asked us in ahead of time, which is, are you paying your speakers and content creators? And that is such a great question. And the answer is, we would eventually like to in future ones. We're in the process of starting a nonprofit, the Monoceros Initiative, that will hopefully get grants and corporate donations so that we can do things like pay our speakers. But this event is going to be free. So we're not collecting any money from anyone. Because we're not collecting any money from anyone, we don't have the capacity to pay anyone either. But we will have an option later on to have like a QR code on your content that we can put on it if people want to buy you a coffee or whatever.
just give you a little tip.
Or yeah, like
Yeah.
did you find this creator to be really helpful and insightful? Did you enjoy this content? Here's a way to give your thanks monetarily. And the same will be there for us. It's a free virtual conference. We don't want to restrict any access for anybody, but if anyone wants to, they donate to our cause and our nonprofit so that we can keep doing more stuff like this. Can I submit funny content?
I love funny content. Sometimes I just post content for me because it makes me laugh. I think as ADHDers, sometimes the funny helps us with the struggle, right? Sometimes it's good to laugh a little bit at what we deal with or find things entertaining, right? So it could be funny, it could be entertaining, it could be silly, you could include puns. And the whole point of this is you've got ADHDers watching this. So we want to grab attention. If you're making people laugh and giving a little bit of helpful info along the way, that's going to be the best. If you're just making something funny, I'm not saying don't submit it because, this is kind of like a variety show. We like a little bit of humor here and there. But especially if you're able to do that and give some really good info, that's the kind of stuff that I think sticks with people more than just a fully informative talk that might lose our attention, right? I know when I go to the conference, even when I'm super stoked about a talk and it just has a lot of good info in it and it's an hour long, I'm like halfway through, I'm like, I don't know what just happened the last 10 minutes. Even if it's good content, I don't have the ability to focus, right? To just focus. So being entertaining and funny is super helpful. I definitely applaud that if you can make that happen. I do think a balance being struck there is probably the best way to go about it. But kind of like we said before, if something is just so funny and really good and it's short and sweet, like I can see us throwing it in there and just being like, hey, this is some good stuff. But it's all dependent, right? It depends on what it is that we're getting.
Yeah, and I want to add that like if funny isn't your bag, you don't need to feel pressured.
So
And, Ron says he, sometimes he goes and it's not entertaining enough. And I will say that like my talks usually aren't very funny, I'm not Liz Welshman, but I, I do try to make all of my talks as concise and as impactful as possible. And Ron has never had a problem keeping his interest and
no,
goes to my talks. And so like
right.
lean in to whoever you are as a person is the best guidance that we can give you. If you're funny, lean into that. If you're like, oh my gosh, jokes make me really nervous, I'm really not that kind of a person, great. Do
Yeah,
let you, and we will appreciate it. Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. These two are actually very related. So the first one is, why are you only taking finished content? And
Mm,
can I submit a preliminary glimpse of my content? So with that, I mean, there's a reason why we're taking finished content, and it's because we want to get away from the talk submission model where it's just like, oh, well, here is a proposal of what I will do. But it doesn't actually guarantee that the finished product follows that proposal at all. And I've been to a lot of talks where someone's proposal was like, I'm going to do all this. I'm going to get interviews. I'm going to track down all this stuff. And everyone was like, great. And then they show up and they like didn't do any of that. And so we want to get away from that model and go straight to the finished content. And that way we are not assessing anyone on like the prestige, which is normally what they do with a lot of these conferences. They're like, well, I don't know if this person is a good speaker. I don't know if this content will be helpful. So I'm going to pick the people who have a track record of doing this. And the problem with that is that if someone doesn't have a track record already, they can't develop one because they're always getting excluded because they don't have the track record. And it just kind
It's
of
like
the rich
it's like
getting
having a yeah, it's like having a job where the requirement is experience, but it's an entry level position. You're just like, cool, how am I supposed to get the experience
yeah.
without someone letting me get the experience? It's gonna be like almost like a film festival, right? What's great about that is yeah, we get to see what it is that we're putting out there, which allows us to kind of make sure that there isn't misinformation that maybe someone wasn't including in their proposal, right? Or that they're not going to be saying things that are inappropriate, or they're not going to be saying things that are completely misguided or taking people off track, or being contradictory to something that we know to be true, things like that. And so this allows us to make sure that we're getting accessible, reliable content. So what you submit is what we're going to use, and it's part of like our film festival that we're having, which I like to kind of call it that.
Yeah. And the answer to can I submit a preliminary glimpse is no. Whatever you submit is what we are going to be grading on as far as final content. And if it's just like, oh, well, this is what I will talk about, I'm like, well, nothing was talked about in this content. So we're going to scrap it and give a sorry, not this time email to it. So make sure it is final content. And I know with ADHD, it's really tough to do that because it can be like, well, what if I spend all this time working on this content and it doesn't get accepted? And that is what I love about what we're doing. Because if the content doesn't get accepted, you can actually post it on all of your platforms immediately. We don't own anything. So it's not like you submit it and now you've lost that and you can't use it again. It's like you actually already have completed finished content for you to post on your own. The worst that can happen is that you have this content completed that you can post. That is not that bad of a worst case.
As someone that makes content all the time and struggles to come up with ideas, if I had a deadline each time I had to make something like this, oh my gosh, I'd have so much more content. So it is kind of a little bit of a like, oh, well, I guess it isn't that big of a deal because now I have stuff that I can put out there.
Yeah. In contrast to that, like the classic talk submission model would be we spent hours on this talk submission, it doesn't get accepted, and now I have nothing. I spent a lot of time on it and it was a waste of time. We don't want to waste anyone's time. If you submit something, you can always post it on your own. If we don't select it, you can post it on your platforms immediately. If we do select it, we just ask that you hold off until after the conference happens. So it can be like the first look, and then immediately afterwards, you can post it on all of your platforms individually. We don't want there to be any restriction. We want this to be a win-win for every single person involved. Yeah.
For the shorts, how short is too short?
I mean, it needs to be long enough so that people can watch it.
Right?
So I would say, I mean, the shortest possible, I would probably say like 30 seconds.
Yeah. We don't want just like a TikTok video, right? We don't want you to just be repurposing your TikToks and Instagrams. We like fresh new content, something where you are getting a point across. 30 seconds would probably be the like minimum. I would probably lean more toward like a minute or two. But I know when I make content, especially informational content, I used to do these like mirror videos, and I struggled so hard to get a concept in under 3 minutes, because at the time for TikTok, that was the max. But that something around 2 minutes, I think, is good. Like you said, 30 seconds. If you have just this mic drop idea that's really going to, you know, blow someone's mind and really help them, great. Get a 30-second clip that can help somebody. And we'll sprinkle those in our shorts. And I think that's really great too, because like we were saying before, we're ADHDers. A 30-second informational clip is awesome. I can watch anything for 30 seconds, right? So
Yeah.
much better than sitting down at your computer and listening to someone for an hour, which is why we've come up with
3 hours. Some of those talks that
3 hours.
for like 3 hours long. That is so
I
long.
don't,
We
I don't
don't
know
want that.
how.
Everyone has ADHD, right? Even
Yeah.
our full length program is 25 minutes or less. And our short, we did say like, yeah, the shortest we would recommend is probably like the 30-second to 2 minutes, but the longest you can submit for a shorts program is 10 minutes. So really any amount of time under 25 minutes.
For the most part, yeah. If you're someone that has given talks in the past and you're like, okay, I've got to take my hour talk and I want to scrunch it down to 25 minutes, that's something you can do. But if you're someone that hasn't given an hour-long talk before and you're like, okay, 25 minutes, I want to do this long talk and I just can't do it concisely for 25 minutes and I keep screwing up and it's going to take me forever to edit this together. Being able to sit down, even if you don't have like a script written out, like just to kind of go like, I really have a lot to say about RSD, right? Or I really have a lot to say about imposter syndrome. And just to like videotape yourself with a couple of bullet points and ideas for a minute or 2 minutes talking about this could end up being a really great submission. Like we would love for you to be able to edit it and have good lighting and good audio and stuff like that. For some people, it may take you all day to give like a really great 25-minute submission. But for some people, a 3-minute or 2-minute talk might take you 20 to 30 minutes to kind of get your ideas together, make sure your audio and visuals are good, and submit that. So it's not going to be this huge process that's going to, take up your entire weekend.
Can the content be edited? Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes, just edit it because, the audience and us, we all have ADHD, and the more concise and fast paced the content is, the easier it is to maintain attention. So if you can edit it, we would really appreciate it. Okay, follow-up question. Can we do a live panel? The answer to that is no. So you can technically do a live panel while you're recording the video.
Yeah.
And then you can edit all the good pieces in. With the 25-minute time frame, it gets really tough to do a live panel because there will be some drag, there will be some answers that are just kind of okay. And to get it under 25 minutes, there's a chance to kind of edit that down so that it's really
It's like the greatest hits.
Yeah, the highlight reel, basically.
Yeah. I want to add also to the editing thing, because I know there's a lot of people, and I've talked to them in person about how editing is overwhelming and scary to them. And it might just be the word, what we're saying, right? We're not asking you to go into like Premiere Pro and make this just an amazing like production of audio and visuals and making sure everything's super tight and edited together perfectly. What we kind of mean by editing is to like cut out some of the extra fluff. There's some really simple programs that can do that. Also, maybe if it's a short, it doesn't need to be edited. You can probably reach out to us if you're like, hey, I want to figure out a way to make this a little bit more visually appealing. I'm always down to chat about that, especially if I have the space to. It might not be me being able to sit there and talk to you for an hour about it, but there's definitely some ideas that can be have. Editing doesn't mean that you have to be this professional editor. It doesn't have to be this crazy, overwhelming thing.
Yes, which comes to our follow-up question. Oh, very good lead in, which is what tools do we recommend using for content creation? We both have very different favorite tools that we
Mhm.
use. My absolute favorite app and tool to use is SpeakFlow. So it is a teleprompter that scrolls based on what you have already said. So it's AI scrolling with a teleprompter, and that makes it really easy to have normal pauses in delivery and have it not just be like on a timer, and also have like our eyes kind of draw it down as we're reading. And so Flow is probably my favorite. I also really like Descript. I've been using that a lot, podcasting, but it also has video elements too. So what is great about that is it can automatically just cut out restarts. So if I said, blah, 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 no, I'm going to start over and then say it again, you can just trim that off. You can edit it like it's a Word document, and it will automatically cut out all the fluff in between. It will take out filler words, and it just makes it a lot easier to do the editing. But if someone doesn't want to get a new app or try something new, even with Descript, I think like Descript is free for the first 5 things that you make. But even if you didn't want to do anything, for a year and a half, I actually edited my podcast on GarageBand and my videos on either iMovie or on QuickTime Player. That will do enough to trim the clips and like put them together and
Mhm.
stuff. Another thing I really like is just using Canva. And I used Canva for my virtual talk at the conference last year as well. So I like took a video and then I put the video into like a little tiny bubble. So I was talking in a bubble, and then my slides were the slides on Canva. So that is a possibility as well. Canva is a creator's best friend, right?
I use Canva for everything, but some other things that you can use, and this is kind of both for like the advanced and the less advanced, but I use a lot of the Adobe products. My wife does voiceover, so I learned a lot of stuff through that. That's been really helpful. Adobe Podcasts, which we were just talking about today, can be really good if you're someone that just does not understand how to edit audio and your audio isn't great. That can kind of give you podcast quality audio through a. I also use this program called Blink. Blink, I pay for it yearly, but they do have a free trial version. So if it was just something that you wanted to use for this, that would work out great. But Blink can give you voiceovers for your videos. It can allow you, and this might be beneficial outside of this, but you can put different closed captioning things on there, make them different size fonts, different styles. Blink also does stuff for like redubbing and different prompts that you can have on your videos. I also use CapCut. I use that usually for TikTok videos, but you can use that for other things where it puts fun little things on your videos, which I think is great. We want you to be as creative as you possibly can. If you decided, I'm going to shoot a 10-minute movie with characters and we're setting up a scene and it's just like a skit for 10 minutes, awesome. Totally into it. But also, if you want to sit in front of your computer camera and you have really great content to give, and at the end of the day, we're like, this is amazing, and it is just you sitting there delivering great content, we are so down for that too. We want you to be who you are, like Jay was saying. You don't have to force yourself to be funny. You don't have to force yourself to have this creative, conversation between an ADHDer and their brain, which is what I do sometimes in my content, right? You don't have to have a whiteboard where you're, explaining things visually, but those things are also encouraged. We want you to be as creative as you feel that you need to be or can be, but also don't feel the pressure to have to do that either.
What we're trying to encourage is for you to get lit up by what you are making and have it be basically unrestricted, minimally restricted, right?
It's not going to be hard for us, right? Because we like to have a little bit of structure.
Yeah.
So if you want to reach out to me and have me give you a little bit of structure, sure. I'll be like, great, just leave it right here. I'll give it to you if you need it. But the idea is that we want you to express yourself. Too often we go to these talks, whether they're in person or they're online, And it feels like I'm at a real estate convention, just hearing someone talk about things. And that's not what we're about in the community, right? I almost think sometimes Comic-Con is more made for ADHDers than a lot of these conferences that we go to, because it
Absolutely.
allows us to be us, right? If you want to give your talk in a unicorn onesie, I really encourage that. I'm so about that. Do you, however you want to do it, feel free to be as unique as you want to be, or also as chill and professional as you need to be for yourselves. It's about you. There is no like you have to do it this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Minimally restrictive. We want you
Mhm.
to feel like you can get lit up, be as creative as you want to be, but we don't want you to freak out and stress out and feel like you are not worthy of this or not capable. I'm not someone who can do TikTok, and that's okay. A lot of people have said to us, I really want to submit, but I feel like I'm not hip enough or I'm not important enough
Mhm.
or all I do is talks. I don't know how to do the technology. And we're just like, great, show up however you are because who you are is enough.
You don't have to be a coach. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a psychiatrist to submit for this. There are no, we need your qualifications for this. I've had conversations with clients that have blown my mind with things that they have realized about themselves. That's what we're here for, right? This is like ADHD info by ADHDers. This is us being like, hey, I'm qualified because of who I am, not because of what I've done, but just the way my brain is. And we're totally for that. You did mention something about restrictions. There is a restriction that we talked about before.
Yes.
NJ, go ahead.
Yes. So the video content has to be in landscape format. I know Ron hates it because he does a lot of portrait orientation, but there's a reason for that. So we want it to be landscape, and that is really important because it is going to be shown on YouTube Live, which is in landscape orientation. So if we get stuff that is in portrait, it's basically just going to be a third of the screen that people can see, and the rest of it's going to be black. And what I do love about this is it's really easy to crop a portrait out of the landscape, but not the other way around, right? Like if you look at what my setup right now, it would basically just be like cropping it right here. And then that could still work. Whatever you use in your content can still work for all of your platforms that are in portrait mode. You just have to crop it down. But the other way around is like so gross. It
Yeah.
like, makes me cringe every time I see
Oh my God.
something portrait in a landscape orientation.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, how do the shorts work? Okay, so the shorts are going to be formatted kind of like a film festival. So if anyone's ever been to a film festival, when they have a shorts program, they basically stick all the shorts back to back. And then
Mhm.
after the chunk of shorts are completed, there is a Q&A where all of the filmmakers of every single short are there to answer questions, and any question can be directed toward any set of filmmakers, right? Or all of them at the same time if that question applies. So we're going to do the same thing where all of the shorts are going to be played back to back, and then we'll have the Q&A afterward where all the creators get to answer questions. We can only be a successful virtual conference with your content. Your content is the most important piece of this, and your submissions are going to be the most important piece of this. Definitely not us.
Yeah.
We're just here to be the facilitators of this beautiful coming together of ideas, but it's really the content that we get that's going to make the big difference. Okay, I think this is the last question.
Right.
And it isn't even really a question. It was a concern that someone brought up to me. I don't know what you will be into or what you will consider misinformation, because misinformation is like a really subjective thing in the ADHD community. And we actually do have something in place for this. All of our submissions go through a Google form, and you'll upload your video that way too. On the form, there's a question that says, if you are not selected, would you like feedback on this with an option to resubmit for a second round of submissions. We put that in place because sometimes there are things where we're just like, oh, but we don't want to disqualify anyone from their content being shown, but we might ask like, hey, this piece has been disproven by these studies. Would you mind just removing this, like editing this piece out? Or if someone was, let's say, like a little too self-promotional in the video, where like the whole first 10 minutes was talking about how great they are, we'll be like, would you mind just like cutting out a little bit of
Like,
it?
we think you're great. We get it.
We would love for you to put this in your bio, but here's what we suggest if you'd like to do a resubmission.
This includes technical stuff too, right? If you submit a great talk, but your lighting is just not super great, or maybe your audio isn't coming through well, we can be like, hey, we love what you have to say. Is there a way, you can reshoot it and we can help give you maybe a little bit of tips, like put some backlighting or some lighting on your face or off to the side, whatever it is, or maybe finding a different device to record it on because the audio is not great, things like that. And to add to what you're saying, one of the hardest things when submitting for anything, I'm going to use an example for myself. Like when I submit a proposal to the conference, and the only thing I get in return is that, oh, we're sorry, we're only taking this many submissions. We had so many great submissions, but we're not accepting yours. My brain starts to be like, well, I have zero idea why it wasn't accepted, right? Was it the topic that they didn't accept? Was it the fact that my proposal wasn't good? Did they not like the way I did it? And I'm just going to sit there and wonder and have no idea how to improve for next time. So the next year I'm writing a proposal, and it's even harder because I'm also now trying to get over that hump of figuring out why I wasn't accepted the year before. And that can be really difficult for us. And a lot of times I think it means we don't end up submitting again, right? Or it means we're just like, well, I'm just not good enough, or I'm not qualified, or they didn't like what I had to say. And we want to give people that opportunity to where we can deliver you that feedback if you want it, because I also know how hard it is to receive that feedback. If you do want it, we will try to deliver it to you in the most kind and empathetic way possible, because we want you to be accepted, right? So we're like, hey, this was what kept you out of it. If you want to try again, we want you to come on.
Yeah. And again, that is optional because sometimes we don't want feedback and we're just like, hey, I don't want you to tell me what I can do to improve next time. I'm just not in the right place for that. And if you don't select that checkbox, great. We will just say like, it's a yes or it's a no, period. And we want that to be an optional thing. No one really wants unsolicited feedback or unsolicited advice. So we're not going to give it to you, but we're going to give you the opportunity to resubmit with our feedback if you want to. And if you're on, you decide like, hey, I submitted this, but like, I decided I really don't want that feedback after all. Great. We will not give it to you. Right.
I get it. I think when we show like our friends or our cohort things that we're doing, I love how Jay always says, and feedback is appreciated. And then I say, but direct it to Jay and not me. And like, that's like the perfect example of like, sometimes it's hard to take feedback. And I'm partially joking when I say that, but also like, yeah, it's not always easy to receive feedback. And so we want to be as understanding of that as possible. But again, also, we want you to get accepted. That's the goal.
But just so you know, if you say, I don't want feedback, and then we say no, and you're like, oh, I would like feedback now, we will say, well, we didn't write it down because you did not ask for it. So we don't have it for you. So I just want to be very clear that if you want the feedback, you need to ask for it up front.
For sure.
And be prepared. A lot of what we had talked about and other FAQ kind of things are on our website. So if you go to TMIADHD.com or Monoceros Initiative, which is a little harder to spell, which is why we have the TMIADHD.com URL, you can find out more about ADHDvCon and the submission guideline.
The big thing to gather from this is we don't want this to be this big and scary thing. We encourage everyone and anyone to submit. You do not need to have any letters after your name. You don't need to be someone super prevalent in the community. That's really was one of our main goals when starting this. So if you're listening to this or you're someone out there that's like, oh, I want to start making ADHD content, this is the perfect chance to start. Show us your ideas, let us know what you got. And especially if you're open to feedback, I think that's a great way to start making content for the community.
Yeah, you don't need to be anything. You don't need to be a published author. You don't need to be a professional. We just are so appreciative for you being here and
100%.
going forward with us. All right. Anything else, Ron?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, this video is going to be available on our YouTube page. If you can, go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is greatly appreciated. And we hope to see you soon.
Yep. Take care.